Welcome to the Akashic Musings podcast. My name is Laura Mazzata, and I will be your guide during this sacred experience. I'm an Akashic healer and teacher, and have also been a therapist for almost 20 years. This podcast is your go-to opportunity for all things healing, inspiration, and empowerment. I will be sharing potent wisdom from divine intelligence in the space of the Akashic Records. For more understanding of what the Akashic Records are, I encourage you to listen to episode 1 or head over to my website at www.theakashictherapist.com. I'm so grateful to have you here, receiving the powerful energetic shifts that radiate through these messages. Just by listening in, you're doing your part to raise the vibration of the planet and fully realize our natural state of wellness and vitality. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Akashic Musings podcast. We are going to start a series on mental health. And it's important to me to talk about this because the term mental health does really not resonate for me anymore, which is fascinating because I've been a traditional therapist for 20 years and a holistic therapist for the past probably 8, maybe a bit less than that. But it's interesting to me to look at these concepts of mental health or physical health because they're really breaking us up into parts and looking at the different parts of us rather than realizing that we need to attend to all 5 layers of our being: physical, energetic, mental, emotional, and spiritual, in order to come into sustainable wholeness. You know, I have worked with tons of people over the last 2 decades that no matter how much I thought outside of the box, which I've always been a therapist who's thought way outside of the box and contacted and collaborated with other professionals and programs and opportunities for my clients to really encourage their highest level of functioning and happiness and joy. And there's just too many people that are in the mental health system that are trying really, really hard and just not able to move forward because they have these patterns that keep coming up for them that nothing seems to be able to touch. And when I started having my own physical health journey, I started looking into a lot of other alternative methods within the energy healing world and had massive results before I even understood what they meant, because my brain was still kind of stuck in inside the box mental health mode, right? And we can't ever really look at, oh, let's heal your mental health or let's heal your physical health. It's always a complete picture. And that's why when I look at things holistically now, it seems silly to just work on the inner child or just work on our cognition or our emotions or just work on a certain part of our physical bodies that don't seem to be functioning at their highest capacity, right? Because they all feed into one another. And we are this very complex, interconnected system of energy that requires deep and intimate understanding in order to be able to have sustainable change. So when I started introducing some of my clients to energy work, it was like a switch flipped. It was unbelievable to see some of these people who had been struggling for decades and really trying hard for decades be able to come into themselves, be able to stand in confidence, be able to see themselves sometimes for the first time. And I love being able to educate people about that now, about how can you see yourself, come into a place of self-acceptance. The closest theory in psychology and in the therapy world that tackles this is internal family systems, because it talks about looking at all the different parts of ourselves and being able to integrate them into the whole. But that is still looking at parts of us from a cognitive perspective or looking at the body and not as much energy work. And the fact is that we aren't just existing within our cognition or within our relationships and our connections to other people. We are more multi-layered than that. And as a therapist, we were taught to evaluate people from multiple different layers, not energy necessarily, but from, we would want to understand where they were physically and whether they've been checked out by their doctor. We would understand how they were thinking. We would understand if they had a cultural background, a spiritual background. But this was really just to get a context. And unless you really specialized in one of these areas, you weren't diving deeply into the extraneous influences. You were really looking more at what is the problem. It's a very problem-centered approach in the mental health system for the most part. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of practitioners, and there's actually more and more every day that are starting to look at things more holistically and really not just fixate on this problem and how can we fix it, because that alone gives people the impression that there's something wrong with them. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You could be sick as a dog and there's nothing wrong with you. You could be, having hallucinations all day, every day. There's nothing wrong with you. It's how can we gather this information that's coming up in your field and allow it to inform us on what you're meant to do here on this planet, what is meant for you. Right? And when we really look at the energetic building blocks of who we are and we understand that, and we get a very, very intimate connection with our own energy, then we get to truly create whatever reality we desire. And sometimes that may take some time to reprogram and reorient ourselves after decades of living the way that we've lived. And sometimes it can be much quicker. It depends on the person. But this whole concept that we are focused on mental health implies that there's something not healthy about our mental state or the way that we're perceiving things. And guess what? It's absolutely fascinating to meet more and more and more people who are thinking a different way, operating a different way, interacting a different way. And instead of looking at them and saying, oh, that's wrong, or they don't fit in, or there's something really screwed up about that person, instead it's like, wow, let me understand how the universe has brought forward a human being that may be operating in a way that we don't quite understand yet. There's infinite possibilities in this world, infinite ways that we can show up as human beings. And the more that we get to know each other and the more that we understand each other's nuances and get curious, the more that we learn all the different possibilities that are available to the people that are coming into this world, to the people that are already here, and how we can collaborate with one another to take advantage of each other's strengths, really. There's a lot of things I don't want to do and that really I suck at. And there's a lot of things that other people want to do or don't want to do that they suck at and that I'm happy to do for them. So it's really this opportunity to, let's get rid of these labels like physical health, mental health, and really just say, like, what does it feel like to be you? What does it feel like to be you? What is that experience like to go through your life on a day-to-day basis? And just start to hear their story, start to understand how the lens through which they see the world and how they experience it. And even if it feels really good on the surface, where is it settling underneath? Does the energy feel good? Does it feel expansive? Does it feel like you're on your way to your next level? Are you feeling really energized and hopeful? Because I'll tell you, there's a hell of a lot of people in this world who don't feel that way. And instead of looking at, well, you have a mental health issue that we need to correct, it's like, ooh, tell me more about what does energize you. Tell me more about a time that you have been energized. Tell me more about the unique mix of things that need to be in place for you to explode into your best. And we arrange that so that someone can shine. It's really not mental health. It's how can we all come together to assist one another with shining? So this is just part one. I'm going to keep chatting about this concept of mental health because it's very important to me that people understand that we're all snowflakes and that there's nothing wrong with you if these traditional approaches are not quote unquote working for you, and that you're never actually stuck, and that your mental health is simply one part of you and doesn't need to define you or become something that you feel needs to be fixed in order to be able to move forward. You're fine. Okay. Instead, it's like, why are we just not understanding the whole complex nature of each human as they present? That's what I will invite you into and the world into in general, so that we have a greater understanding of how humans are showing up uniquely day after day after day. So stay tuned for the next part of this series, and thanks so much for listening. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Akashic Musings podcast. I'm so grateful you're taking the time to integrate healing at the deepest level. If you loved this episode, connect with me on Instagram at Emerge Healing and Wellness, or contact me through my website at www.theakashictherapist.com. I'll see you next week on the next episode of the Akashic Musings podcast. Bye for now, and have a wonderful week.